Today's podcast is brought to you by Mountain Mule Transportation, located here in Bozeman, Montana. Mountain Mule is a private SUV and truck service, offering chauffeur services in all of Southwest Montana. Whether it's your next skiing, hunting, or fishing trip, early morning or late night trips to and from Bozeman Airport, as well as weddings and private parties. No matter the occasion, Mountain Mule will get you there safely and on time. To learn more, visit mountain-mule.com and book today.
This podcast is with Foster Mobley. Foster is a husband, a father, and an author. Foster lives in Belgrade, Montana with his wife, Cathy. Foster is the author of Leadership, Rethinking the True Path to Great Leading. He is the founder of FMG Leading. He is on the board of One Montana, a nonprofit organization. Foster has a political science degree from UCLA, an MBA and doctorate from Pepperdine University. Foster has helped head coaches for 9 different NCAA national championship teams. Foster is a great friend, and we had a great conversation. Please enjoy this podcast with Foster Mobley. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
It's a treat.
Yeah. Can you start us off like you normally do?
Yeah, usually Foster, where are you from?
Originally Houston, Texas. Moved to a small suburb of LA when I was 3.5. I guess my family moved and I went along with them. And grew up in Los Angeles suburbs, and spent most of my adult life there.
Downey, right?
In Downey.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you remember anything in Texas? I like to ask folks their earliest memory.
I love that question. Yeah, no, I love that question. And the answer is no. I remember stories that my parents told my brother and I about our time there. Lived in a development suburb of Houston called Spring Valley Village, which I don't think exists anymore. I've tried to find it. Tried to find the house on the street that I recall from their stories, but no, I don't. My earliest memory, and again, memories are so funny. We drove from Texas to California in our 55 Chevy, came through on Interstate 10, stopped in Palm Springs where there was this still, I think at the time, that massive dinosaur. I don't know if you've seen it outside Palm Springs. I think it was there then, and maybe I'm making that up. Very possible I'm making that up. And we stopped for date shakes at Hadley's in Palm Springs in 1959. And I have a picture from that, and I have some memory of that, but that's kind of the earliest, 3.5.
This is you, your brother,
and mom and dad.
Okay. And
Yep.
You've got one brother and yourself?
Yes. My family of origin, I'm the only one left.
Okay.
So out here on my own.
Yeah. So what was it like growing up in Downey? What was Downey like at the time? What was Los Angeles like at the time?
Leave it to Beaver.
Well, you're going to have to explain that.
I know. It was leave it to Beaver. It's the, moms that didn't work. Dads drove off to work in the morning, came back after a couple of pops after their work. Moms ruled the roost, playing every sport possible out in the street under the streetlights until it got dark and I had to come in. Just really idyllic, really super easy, very homogenous, although we didn't know the difference at the time. But yeah.
What did your father do?
My father was a claims manager for an insurance company.
Okay.
And he was there's an expression, hail fellow, well met. What it means is he never met a stranger.
Mm.
He was the life of the freaking party. And I wish some of that had rubbed off on me, but yeah, he and high school educated, but one of the most intelligent and studied men I ever met. Mm. He would dive deeply into history and religion and art, and he'd go to the library, our little library, and would buy books they were selling for a nickel or a dime or something like that, he'd bring home a box full of books
Mhm.
all the time. And he'd voraciously read them. He just loved learning. He didn't love learning when he was in high school, itching to get on with the rest of his life. I think both he and his high school were happy to see him leave. But yeah, very studied man.
And where did he grow up?
He grew up in Georgia,
Okay.
small town Georgia,
Okay.
Monroe, Georgia.
Got it.
And his father was very accomplished. He was a banking superintendent for the state of Georgia. They lived in this. If you can picture, so is Gone with the Wind too arcane a reference?
No.
Okay. So if you picture Terra, these big antebellum mansions and
Mhm.
stuff. In Monroe, Georgia, the Mobley family had that. That was the Mobley family house.
Okay.
And but my father couldn't wait to get out. There was a depression time and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So he was ready to get on the road.
And your brother, he was older than you or younger than you?
Yeah, 3 years older. Now we're both 3.5 years older. We're both adopted.
Okay.
Both adopted at birth. So I have never known any of my birth family.
Hmm.
Okay.
And so that's kind of a thing. And he was, I'll just say, in temperament, in looks, in ambition, he and I could not have been more different.
Hmm.
We could not have been more different. I was the athletic one. He was kind of the nerdy guy,
Mhm.
Anyway, there's just lots of, so we didn't, and he was 3.5 years older. So like our middle schools or junior highs were 3 years. So I didn't know any of his friends and he didn't know.
Yeah, you
any
guys
of
didn't
mine.
overlap.
It was just wide enough gap.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as you got into that school, he was gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
he's biologically your brother or no?
No, he is not.
Okay.
Both adopted.
Both adopted.
Got
Different mothers.
Okay. And you've never met your biological parents?
No.
Okay.
I looked before my oldest, who is now, how old is Aaron? 40, 41, going to be 42 shortly. Before she was born, I went on this campaign to try and find my birth mother. And I wanted to find out, as much as anything else, like, knowing that kind of stuff is kind of cool, kind of important. But I wanted to find out about health issues. And, like, am I passing along anything bad to my unborn child? And made some progress for a while. But then she was born and I kind of lost steam. I was telling you the story about, I called one of my college roommates on the way in. He's an attorney in Orange County. And we were having lunch one time. I bet it was 20 years ago. Excuse me. And he said, "Hey, what's up?" And I told him that I was kind of in the middle of this search. And he goes, "You want to find your birth mother?"
Uh-huh.
I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Give me her name. Give me everything you know about her. I will have been in contact with her by noon tomorrow."
So he's going to use
I'd
like
looked for
some
10
system.
years.
Yeah.
I had looked for 10 years.
Uh-huh.
He goes, "I have the best researcher. My paralegal is the best researcher anybody's ever known. I will have contacted her by tomorrow."
Okay.
Seriously? He goes, "You want me to do this?" I go, "Hell yeah." So, and he did. He
Okay.
found her. And she was living in some little town in Michigan.
Okay.
She was a freshman in Michigan State and got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, that was a kind of the badge of dishonor.
Mm-hmm.
Her family sent her to Houston to live with her uncle to have the baby out of sight of everybody, family, friends, neighbors.
Go away for a while.
Go away. Yep. And so that's when they adopted me in Houston. And then she went back to Michigan and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, made contact, and it was very clear she had not told her family about me and wanted nothing to do. So I learned that was kind of, everybody goes, "God, do you feel doubly rejected because she gave you up for adoption and then she refused to or didn't want to kind of meet you?" And I went, "No, I mean, her life was what it was. It was not in the place where she could acknowledge. That's on her. That's not on me." So,
did you feel that way when that was happening, or did that bother you?
You know what, Kyle? I did, because it was so otherworldly to me.
Okay.
I don't think of myself any differently than anybody that grew up in a nuclear family with biological mom and dad. The whole biology thing it never occurred to me.
Got it.
Yeah. The only time I really ever felt it was when I learned that I was adopted. And that happened at 21. So I think I just finished finals as I'm going to say a junior in college. And my father, who had left small town Georgia to, make a living during the Depression and then stayed away, had not really been close with his family. And we were attending, he wanted to attend a family reunion back in Monroe, Georgia. And so he said, come with me. So we took red-eye flight, finished finals in the afternoon, got to LAX, flew to Atlanta. And we'd been up a lot that night, flying there, and get to the hotel room. And he says, take a look at the phone book. Well, that's really bizarre.
Yeah, like what?
Random. Like, why am I looking at the phone book? He goes, look for all the Mobleys. Because in California, you'd open a phone book and you'd see, back in the day when there were phone books, you'd have 3 Mobleys.
Yeah, not many.
Page after page after page
Mobleys.
after page after page after page. It's really fun to go, wow, that's really wild. And then he said something. I know he didn't know what he was saying at the time, but he said something like, that's when your mother had a hysterectomy.
Okay.
And it was before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And I, not being the, super, super great in biology, but I was smart enough to figure out, like, wait, that doesn't pencil out too well.
Uh-huh.
She had a hysterectomy and then I was born.
Right.
He goes, you don't know.
Mm.
And he was just crestfallen. He was just so upset that I didn't realize, I didn't know that I was adopted. And that's how I found out in that, wee hours in a hotel room in Atlanta, Georgia, when I was a junior in college.
Mm.
I called my brother and I said, you sitting down? I got a question to ask you. He goes, okay. I said, did you know you're adopted? And he goes, not really.
Oh,
and
wow.
he goes, I remember mom and dad reading us certain books when I was younger.
Okay.
So now he's 3.5 years younger, right? So they're reading him a book and I'm probably too young to even know what's going on.
Yeah.
And there's a famous book back in the day called The Chosen Child. And so when you're adopting a child, you read this and you're special because you're chosen, which I happen to believe. But he said, I remember them reading that book. And then after a while, they just stopped because they knew I had gotten it.
Mm.
Yeah, but I was 3.5 years younger.
Yeah.
I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, and we never talked about it again. So I haven't thought about it in all that time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but that's the only time I really feel like there was any kind of emotional charge with the whole adoption thing.
Were you upset with him for a day, a week, a month, a year? No,
I'll tell you what, you know how they talk about artists get really angsty. When they're angsty, they really create great stuff. So this angst, I went back and I wrote a book of poetry. I still have it.
Interesting.
And it just, I don't know, it just like exploded in my brain. I got really creative.
Mm-hmm.
And
you were expending energy.
Yeah. It was wild. It was just wild. But no, yeah.
That's a wild story, man.
Well, I'll tell you what, when you're 21 years old or 20 years old, whatever, and then figuring out that a lot of the foundation on which your life or your identity is based is changed, it's a mind blower. So it did take me a while to wrap my brain around that. Just like, okay, now, not upset, but who am I?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not that kid, like, who am I? What do I really, where do I come from? All those kind of basic roots kind of questions. So, still haven't figured all that stuff.
When's the last time you looked at the poetry?
About a year ago, I looked to see if I could find it.
Is it any good?
Oh, hell no.
Anything more?
Oh, hell no.
I didn't know if you had a gem worth publishing.
Yeah, no. Yeah, publishers aren't waiting to get this manuscript. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And then, so I went back, and that school year, I took a poetry class at UCLA, and I went through all that stuff, and I pulled out the one poem that I thought, okay, now this is really clever. Because when, I don't know about others, I was just trying to outthink the poetry. I was trying to be so slick and clever, and it's almost like trying to write music lyrics. And, I've got to have this hook that's just really sharp and really clever, as opposed to letting things kind of organically happen and, find expression. And so I took this poem and I submitted it as one of my assignments, and it almost made it through. I mean, like, I probably got a B- on it or something with serious edits.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was it was so clever and so smart until I wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting that you didn't find out until that age, and kind of the way that you found out, meaning that I could see how, or I perceive that it would have come out earlier at some point, right? Like there's a family argument, and somebody says, your mom or dad says something that they shouldn't have said. And
Yeah.
And so that tells me that, and maybe I'm wrong, but like that seems to tell me that like they loved you guys just like, totally normal. And I assume they took really good care of you guys.
Yeah. No complaints about any of that. Now, that's interesting that you picked that up, though. That I was, I don't know, 12 or 13. And they'd been publishing in newspapers stories about hair loss being genetically linked.
Uh-huh.
And I went to my mom and I said, Mom, did your father have his hair, or did he lose it?
Uh-huh.
This is back before I knew I was going to be losing mine, but yeah, didn't even think about that. But
you just wanted to know at 13.
I just wanted to know, like, what am I going to look like later? She goes, oh, honey, you don't have anything to worry about. He had a full head of hair. And that little snippet, I remember, like, she had a hysterectomy. Apparently, it was fairly traumatic for her. I'm thinking she just put it all out of her mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was something there that didn't allow her to fully acknowledge the fact that I was not her biological. Because so after I found out, age 21, I thought, I'm going to go find my birth parents. And I talked to my dad first, and he said, I'll help you as long as it's for the right motives, right? And but he said, don't mention it to your mom, because I don't think I don't know if she'll be able to process it. Mm-hmm. So that leads me to believe there was something for her.
So you never talked about it with your mom? Got it.
Never did.
Got it.
Yeah, and he was really supportive. He was very helpful. The challenge was getting born into the state of Texas that don't really believe adoptees have any rights. Mm. So that took me, again, I spent 10 years looking, didn't find much. Found my birth name.
Meaning you didn't have rights to search and find them?
No, the parents have all rights, and the adoptees have none.
I see.
Yeah, I don't know if that's changed. I haven't paid much attention to it lately. But anyway, it's an interesting side note. Yeah, I had a super happy childhood growing up, and was able to do whatever I wanted to do. Like at that point, young men feel like they command the world. I can't speak for young women because I don't know, but I felt like I was, I was the boss. Like I could do whatever I wanted to do, and let's go. And so it really did not have any impact on all of that.
All right, got it.
Yep.
A buddy of mine just told me a couple of nights ago. He said, "Did you know Aaron Judge was adopted?" I didn't.
You know what? I think I'd heard something like that. I think I'd heard something like that.
And he just said to me, "Do you think he'd be where he is, if he wasn't adopted?"
Oh, what a question!
I said, "Probably not." In all honesty,
yeah, probably not. Probably not. Yeah, I mean, I got adopted by a middle class family, nuclear family, all together, and got to do what I wanted to do. We didn't have a ton of money, if I'm truly honest, I'd say kind of lower middle class. If we got a new pair of jeans every couple of years, that would be a big deal. Because back in the day, what they would do is when you when you would, tear holes in the knees of your jeans is
Put a patch on it.
you put a patch on. So I'm pretty good at patches. So, but yeah, no, super happy and good. And I don't think I would have the same life. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
Did you ever speak with your father about their motive to adopt or no?
God, Tim, what a great question. I never did. I think he mentioned when this whole thing came out that they both really wanted kids, and my mom was kind of, I won't say despondent, but very sad she couldn't have some of her own.
Mhm.
And so the way I got adopted, so my brother, older, 3.5 years, got adopted first. And the family doc, the way it worked back then is you'd have a family doctor, and then he or she would, mostly he's those days, was family doc for lots of people. And then somebody get pregnant and they had an unwanted pregnancy, they would arrange that kind of stuff. So that's what happened here. So after my brother after my father and mother got my brother, they said, now look, this is it, because this doesn't happen all the time. So, you've got one child.
Yep.
And then about a week before I was born, and I came early, about a week before I was born, the same doctor, Dr. Henry Withers. Withers is my middle name. They named him after me. That's a whole different story. Or named me after him. He said, okay, look, last minute, I know, but you want another one? And they go, sure. Then show up in the hospital on this date. You're gonna have another kid. So it just happened super quickly and unplanned and all that.
Cool.
Yep.
That's awesome. What kind of an adolescent were you? Were you getting into trouble? Were you a good kid? What were your grades like? What sports did you get into?
Yeah. There are about 3 or 4 great questions in there, so I'm going to kind of peel them apart.
You can answer any of them.
Yeah,
all of them.
Let's see where we go with this. Very athletic as a child. Pursued football, baseball, basketball, track. Tried swimming for a while. That didn't pan out so well. I was better on my feet on the earth than I was in the water, but loved it anyway. And I happened to our neighborhood, our elementary school, our YMCA teams. There were a bunch of us that were all good athletes, and we all kind of joined together in this thing. So I remember for my 4th grade year, 5th grade year so our local YMCA teams, football, basketball, baseball, we did not lose a game in any sport. And for our elementary school, didn't lose a game. And so that was the same kind of deal. Like, I was master of my domain, man. I could go out and, hey, let's go. I'm going to be an all-star. I was the youngest kid in our town to make it to the major leagues in Little League. I was 9 years old. And nobody under 11, or maybe there were a couple of 10-year-olds that had made it, but nobody at 9 had ever made it. I shouldn't have made it. Like, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was a good athlete. And so could do all that kind of stuff. So athletically could do whatever I really wanted to do. Then as, bodies change and grow up, and you grow up, I was very average in high school. I played basketball. If I'm very kind to myself, I'll say I was 6th man. I was probably 7th or 8th man.
Okay.
Could play, really good skills, but I couldn't shoot to save my life. Baseball was probably my best sport, but it was boring to me. So I kind of stopped at 13 or something like that. So, but in terms of this is interesting, talking about programming, my father and mother, both being of the Depression era, hammered in me from an early age. This is like the water that I breathe. That responsibility and taking care of yourself and handling your stuff was the most important thing you could do. So, boy, I took that to heart. I was a great student. I didn't get into trouble. Started working when I was 14 and a half, washing dishes at our local ice cream parlor. Graduated high school early. graduated college early. Like, man, for me, I bought that responsibility shit hook, line, and sinker.
You loved it.
Well, I guess, you know, every action like that you take has, you know, consequences. And so really positive ones. You know, age 23, I'm got my college degree. I have a master's in business. I'm, you know, charging out, doing what I want to do. I'm married. And yet I had no sense of life. Like, I put down all my fun stuff when I was 13 or 14, didn't pick it up again.
Yep.
So when I turned 50, I had a buddy. Honest to God, this is no joke, who helped me learn how to have fun, learn how to play again. Like, all the rest of that time was like head down, grind it, you know, prepare yourself, take care of your family, all that kind of stuff. And in that time too, I went through a marriage because I don't think I was kind of emotionally very well developed. I don't think either one of us were at age 22.
Sure.
You know, like, yeah, what are you thinking? But we both thought we were ready, and 2 wonderful kids from that marriage. And but yeah, the overemphasize. It's almost like if you did curls every day and that's the only weight you lifted, you'd have these really impressive arms.
Yeah.
You know, like guns till like they don't quit.
Yep.
And the rest of you'd have crappy calves.
Right.
Walk into a gym and people laugh at you like, it doesn't look right. That's kind of what the singular focus was. And I find a lot of people in my generation too, same kind of deal. Like, I don't know where they got it, probably same place I did, but yeah, it was about work. It was about work. And so as I'm writing this book now, part of this multi-generation issue in the workplace people have is that people don't think like me. People don't act like me. They don't work as hard as me. And I look at them and go, and they're not wrong. They are not freaking wrong.
When did you figure that out?
I just want to say too, that's a great analogy with the biceps.
Can't you just see it?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. When did I figure it out?
Well, when did you figure that piece out because maybe at one time you were thought like, well, they should be like me.
Oh, yeah. I don't have a lot of shoulds in me.
Okay.
I really don't. I think that's one of the things that's helped me be an advisor to other people, because shoulds are based on our judgments. And our judgments, when we're judging people or situations, that's different than kind of discerning and making decisions. But when we're judging like that, it means that we're fixed in our viewpoint about something.
Yeah.
And there may be something blind that we need to pay attention to over here. Anyway, I call this my origin story. At age, and I think you've heard this one. Randomly, at age 49, I woke up one morning, and you could not have predicted this. I woke up one morning and had this very strong thought: you're going to die in a year. And if you don't, if you live to 51, that's not up to you. So all that mortality stuff is out of your hands, dude. What would you regret not having started or done in the next 12 months if that was the case? And that shifted everything right there.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So from that point at 49, I'd always wanted a doctorate. I don't know why. I'd always loved school. And every time I went to school, it opened up so many new things for me. So I always wanted to do that. I went back to school.
Back to UCLA or back to Pepperdine?
No, I went to Pepperdine. Yeah,
okay.
Pepperdine. That's where I got my master's. And so they had the program in my doctoral studies that I wanted. Went back and did that. Built my business. In that period of time, the next 10 years, moved to Montana. Started working with, one of the things I've always loved athletics, helped coach my kids coming up. I have a pretty good eye for certain things technically with that. A baseball swing. I know too freakishly much about that I'm not proud of. But I've always been kind of close to athletics. And with the work that I do with business teams, I started working with my oldest daughter's travel softball team. She's 12 years old. And I went to the coach one day and said, I do a lot of stuff for teams and helping them be better. Would you let me play a little bit here? Would you let me try a few things out? So I started experimenting on these 12-year-old girl softball players.
This guy's over here manipulating 12-year-old girls.
No, yeah, exactly. Well, what do you think about? Yeah. And really had fun doing it. And all around the notion of, even at 12, people want to have a say about something. They want to have a voice in, what's the dugout look like? What color scrunchies are we going to be wearing tomorrow?
Oh, wow.
What cheers do we do? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
They wanted to have a say. And unfortunately, there are too many, mostly men coaches, who are clueless to all that kind of stuff. So I started working with teams like that. And then my daughter got into high school, and her high school team won the mythical national championship in softball. She scored the winning run, by the way. But I worked with that team, and to help them, it's really hard. And, adolescents, giving them a voice or letting their voice come out, giving them a say of what's working, what's not. So then she got recruited into college, and I started working with her college team. And from that point on, I think I've worked now with, close to 20 Division I, NCAA collegiate teams, and been part of 9 national championships. And I'm just kind of the team whisperer for a lot of teams. I'm working with a couple right now.
Yeah.
So fun.
So how did you, so that's, that started it when your daughter was 12, but then you became, it seems like you became really intentional about, hey, I want to work with these sports teams.
Yeah.
And so you then reached out to them and said, hey, knocked on somebody's door and said, hey, can I help you? Or they reached out to you. How'd that work out?
So one thing I learned very quickly is there are a lot of people like me, whether they're trained or not, who want to be involved in a big time team.
Sure.
And so I had one coach tell me one day, if I hadn't reached out to you, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Because I get 1,000 calls at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Hey, coach, I'd like to come in and help you and your team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Because those people can get in the way and be a distraction. And
do the wrong stuff, and they're not trustworthy. They could be wonderful, but
it's more, they might be selfish. It's about them.
How do you vet that?
Yeah.
And college coaches aren't really good at making that discernment. No, when Erin got recruited, when she got recruited to Northwestern, the woman that recruited her was the assistant coach. Before Erin started, her actually travel date to college was 9/11/2001, which meant she couldn't travel. Anyway, but by the time that happened, her assistant coach had taken over the head coach job. And she knew that I had done this work. We, like when your kid's recruited, the coaches know a lot about family and if they're good at it, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
If they're paying attention.
Yeah. So this coach and I started talking. And so I worked with her all summer long about the transition from assistant coach to head coach and what kind of program she was going to have and kind of core values and beliefs and the processes and how they were going to segment the system, just stuff. And so helped her make that transition, stayed connected with the team for a couple of years in that regard, while Erin was a freshman and sophomore. And then kind of fast forward to 2007, the head coach at UCLA softball, Hall of Famer Sue Inquist, had decided to retire. Similar situation. Her assistant coach, longtime assistant, was going to take over. Never been an assistant or never been a head coach before. And so Sue had become friendly. And, any of these collegiate sports at some level is a really small world.
Yeah, the coaches all know each other.
They all know each other. Yeah. They've taught and been to clinics together and all that kind of stuff.
They played against each other 10, 15 years ago, whatever.
For sure. Exactly right. So Sue had become friendly with the head coach at Northwestern and said, by the way, when you took over, how did you do this? How, did you have somebody help you figure it all out? I said, yeah, Foster. And Sue knew who I was because she had recruited my oldest daughter as well. So I got a call from Sue Inquist, and she said, our head coach really having a tough time in this first year and the head coach, Kelly Inouye Perez, who's also a Hall of Famer now in her own right, won several national championships. She would say to me, I'd be standing in the third base box as a new head coach. And I know core beliefs. I know exactly how this game is played. I've been playing it since I'm 6. I'm whatever age now. I know how it's played. I've played for some of the best coaches. I know the technical parts, but I'd stand in the third base box and somebody hits one up the middle. I got a runner on first. Do I send her or not? And I'm hearing Sue Inquist's voice in my head as opposed to trusting my own instincts. And I can't make that switch go off. So kind of getting her regrounded. So anyway, she called me. So I started working with her in 2000.
Like all of a sudden she's the coach now.
She's the coach.
Like she needed to make that switch.
She's it. So I worked with her for about a year, then started working with her staff. And in 2010, we won the national championship with that team. And Kelly had been working with me one day. She came back. Her office was right next door to the head coach of UCLA women's gymnastics. Well, they don't have men's gymnastics, but women's gymnastics. And her name is Miss Val. She goes by Miss Val. Miss Val saw Kelly and goes, Where you been? Like, you look pretty happy. She goes, yeah, I just spent time with Foster. Goes, who is this Foster dude?
Yeah.
So, well, she told him. So I get this call. Hello, Foster. Yeah. This is Miss Val, Valerie Condos Field. Oh, lovely to meet you. I know all about you. Lovely to meet you. She goes, yeah, I'm head coach of UCLA women's gymnastics. Dead silence. Great. That's wonderful. Dead silence. She goes, I've won 5 national championships. That's amazing. That's really great.
Congrats.
Dead silence. And then she said one of the most profound things anybody's ever said to me in that regard, said, and I haven't won in 5 years, and I want help figuring out if I'm the reason. I'm like, wow. To not only think that, but to say it publicly to somebody you don't even know.
Because that thought had been in her head for a while.
Yep.
And she wanted to get it out.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And so I started working with them. So same kind of deal, 2008, 2009 timeframe. So I start working with her I do coach her for a year. Then she brings in her coaching staff and I work with them. And then that season, they won a national championship. So April of 2010, they won a natty. And then June 2010, softball wins a natty. So had I marketed myself,
yeah,
I could have been
big
man on campus.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Also, in between there, I walked for my doctoral degree.
Okay.
So that was a great 3-month period of my whole freaking life.
Yeah.
It was
cool.
wonderful. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
This is how many years past that? You said it was a dream you had at 49?
Yeah. I wanted to, I didn't, it's funny. I couldn't picture it, Tim. I couldn't picture how this would work, but I wanted to get more. In fact, this is all pro bono work. I wanted to start giving back. And I had experienced how bad leadership is in youth sports. Like, oh my God, you see more bad coaches than you see good ones. And they may know the game better than you do, but they can't relate to their players. Or
they're way too emotional.
They can't get out of their own way. And so you see, if you look at the statistics, the number, especially young women, the number of women that play these sports, it's super high. And then at 12, it starts dropping. And then at 14, it's done.
They've done it. They stopped playing sports.
Stop playing sports. And I think some of it has to do with the way they're treated, anyway. So
yeah,
I wanted to get involved in, I didn't know what it would look like, but wanted to give back, and athletics was an easy way to do it.
Since we jumped pretty much from 22 to 50.
Yeah.
This is perfect. That's how we like to do it.
How does with the work you were doing with these teams, how does that relate with the work you were previously doing? What were you kind of doing that led to this?
Yeah. My career has been, so anyway, that's great. I'll fill in a couple of gaps here. when I got out of my business school, I went to work for a very small consulting firm, and it dealt with the people stuff. They also dealt with HR and all that. And I was trained in HR in a previous job. But at 27 or 28, I started my own practice. And it was always based on two things. One, my business school was a function of two things. One, understanding business strategy. I wanted to know what levers to pull and why certain companies were successful and others weren't. And then the other lever was their people. So I had a dual focus of strategy and org behavior or org theory, whatever. So I started this firm at 27. In fact, we are now in our 41st year of that firm. But it was based on some core principles of human respect, basic respect, full and deep listening, great collaboration, appealing to a higher goal, stuff like, basic stuff. But those are kind of the core principles and stuff. So that's the same kind of ethos that I brought into all of my corporate clients and brought into the athletic realm. I didn't see any difference between the two. But getting used to working with 18 to 22-year-old young men and women, that was a whole different thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was a whole different thing. So,
where were you based out of when you started this?
Orange County.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were working all over the country.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, that's part of the lament from, my oldest child is 41. So started about the same time I started the company, and I'd been consulting for 3 years prior to that. Until, my 50s, I was on the road probably 70% of the time. And so my lament is, I think I'm a really great dad. No, you're not. You're on the road. You can't parent when you're in Cleveland. Like, all the phone calls in the world don't, at least for me, couldn't make up for that. And that was before, FaceTime and virtual work and stuff like that. But when you're on the road, and you're working 14 hours a day, and you come home and you're exhausted, and then you got to go out on the next Sunday. So
that's that bicep again.
That's the bicep, man. Oh man, my arms were studly.
Yeah.
Oh man, the guns. Oh yeah, my guns were great. The rest of my physique was not quite so well developed.
So a thought I just had was, it'll be two questions, but you start this business at 27, 28. And you're coaching, or at least now, right? And so maybe it wasn't the same then, but you're coaching these these CEOs or high level executives from these really large corporations.
Yep.
Some probably very well established, and some maybe startups. What was that like at 30 years old when you're the younger guy that's starting your own business, and you may not know anything about their business, right? Or their operations. And so you're going in to coach some of these people. I guess I'm curious of like how they thought of you, of like, well, what the hell can this guy, how can this guy help me? He's younger than me, and he doesn't know anything about our type of business. What was that like when you were 30 and you're walking in the room with 55-year-old guys that run billion-dollar companies?
Yeah, I started when I was 24. I started doing this kind of stuff, and I'd walk in a boardroom and I'd be making a presentation on a specific issue. And one thing I noticed was, like that kind of, at very first. And then I opened my mouth and I had something to say.
Yeah.
And there wasn't bullshit. It was some insight. And so I learned pretty early on that my interests and abilities as a teacher and as a good communicator, I could always get my idea across. And so people listened.
Yeah.
And here's this 24-year-old guy in a boardroom full of suits and stuff. And while there was initial skepticism, it didn't take long to get through all that kind of stuff. And when I started my firm, it was half, at the time we called it management training. So I did a lot of management training, did that all over the world, I think 10 different countries, because I subbed out to another company that based out of Boston. It's where I met my wife, Cathy. But I learned theories, constructs. I learned their data for, what makes an effective manager, effective leader. I polished my skills as a presenter, as a facilitator, as a problem solver. The other half of the business was they'd say, our HR department screwed up, come and help us fix it. So there's a lot of, problem solving and stuff like that. So I always had some grounding in whether the solution set or it's an idea set around this training stuff. So that part made it super easy. I didn't start coaching until I realized every one of these organizations I'd go into, and they say, our culture's dysfunctional, help us figure that out. It all came from the top.
Yeah.
It all filtered down. So if I wasn't working with the CEO in those organizations, none of the changes were going to work. So
they went down and they stopped somewhere and
Yeah.
never trickled down into
Yep.
the rest of the org.
Yep. We've got one right now, very active engagement where the CEO's the issue, and now it's got to trickle up because everybody else sees it, but the emperor has no clothes. So, but all sorts of that. So, the age thing was never an issue.
Okay.
Just never an issue.
Yeah, you were effective, and so that became it's not a problem.
I have a belief, and I'm not calling myself intelligence, but I think quality can always show.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not trying to be something you're not, if you're not pretending, right? You can just be focused on them and their solution and all that kind of stuff. It comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So, you'll hear people like, well, so-and-so didn't have a college degree. Yeah, but talent shows.
Right.
Talent does show. So I think that was kind of it.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, and I don't know how it started this way. I think it started because I knew some people and I'd done some good work for their companies. But I was always asked in by the CEOs. I wasn't asked in by HR people. I wasn't asked in by a operating VP. I had C-suite sanction in every one of these organizations. And so, I realized that the leaders, CEO and or C-suite, had a lot of contribution to the issues that their organization was facing.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the line too, and I early days, I think I was a lot of a people pleaser. I really wanted to make sure that if I got into an organization, I wasn't going to, fuck it up and, like that. And I wanted to stay. But I got the reputation of being able to tell the truth. And so, Deloitte, largest privately held professional services firm in the world, I coached their top people for 20 years. Chairperson, US CEO, all their regional people for 20 years, because they knew that if there was hard messages to deliver, I would do it. And I do it in a respectful way. And I help people understand it. And I'm not, like sandpaper.
That's so interesting, because you think about a professional services company going and helping another professional services company who actually their businesses overlap and are competing for the same work in some ways.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Well, it's really funny too, Kyle. That's a really great catch. In, many, many years ago, late 80s, early 90s, I met a guy because at a client organization, and his firm, it was KPMG, still around, still very large. He was a partner in their healthcare practice. And our firm were called in to help a hospital in Denver. And we were going to help them with a process improvement thing. At the time, they called it TQM, Total Quality Management. And KPMG was in there working on a very technical workflow redesign, job structure redesign in one of their nursing units, which is way over my pay grade. Anyway, the CEO calls us in to his office and he said, KPMG, FMG. He said, the stories about consulting firms throwing the other ones under the bus are notorious. I'm not going to have that here. I'm going to leave the room. I want you guys to figure out how you and your teams are going to work together and support each other and not drag each other down.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. And we found out we liked each other. And actually still, he brought me into one of the most significant pieces of work we've ever had before or since. And but it started like that. It's
So then you had a reputation of working with people instead of throwing them under the bus.
Well, sorry, I forgot about the last part of the conversation. So within a year or two, he calls me from KPMG, this guy, and he says, "Will you teach our consultants how to consult?"
Got it.
He goes, "I'm taking a big risk here. This better work. But I like your approach to stuff. Our consultants think they hung the moon. They didn't. They're very smart people, but they don't always, like, we get to step 10 on a project and our clients are at step 1. You go side by side with your clients and help bring them along. I want to learn how to do that. I want our people to learn how to do that." So that was the very first incident of a professional services firm hiring me to go in and help them out, help them see how they needed to be approaching their clients in a different way. Yeah, and then all those years later, Deloitte did it too.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah, funny.
Yeah. I'm going to use the restroom real quick. Keep going.
Yeah, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So when you walked into these boardrooms or in front of these CEOs at 24, what do you think gave you this kind of, if you could just look back, is there any one thing you think that gave you this confidence and this ability to articulate and kind of express who you are and what you're doing? Because it seems to have been pretty profound even at that age to have the effect it did.
Yeah. At one level, I'd say I have no earthly idea, but I do have an idea. When I was in high school, we had a very big focus on a service club. It's part of a men's service organization called Kiwanis. Have you heard of Kiwanis?
I haven't.
Anyway, like Rotary Club.
Okay.
It's one of those. And it's international. And they had the Key Club, they had the high school version of it. It's called Key Club. And our high school happened to be the #1 Key Club in the US and Canada and all that. So we were really good at that. We had a really great advisor. And one of the things that was available to young men, because they were not co-ed at the time, was to be elected as an international president or a country president or a state, whatever they called it, governor. And so I got involved in that whole track. And what it meant was some months in my sophomore and junior year, I ran for elected office in Key Club. And so as a sophomore, I was elected as they called it Recording Secretary of California, Nevada, and Hawaii. And to do that, you had to go through these caucuses. And so you'd have everybody from one area come and they'd pepper you with questions. And how well you answered them was what they were going to base their votes on. Not unlike today in a town hall and that kind of stuff. But I was starting to do that at age 14. And so for the next 2 or 2.5 years, I would spend 4 hours a day getting grilled by people helping me prep for that. I eventually ran for international president of Key Club and lost. And that was a kind of a foundational moment. I'm still not sure I processed it all. I'm just kidding. Boy, that messed me up for so long. I'm thinking, don't you see these good? No, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, but the prep for that left me extremely confident that responding to questions, hearing what's behind the question, all that stuff, I just got trained into it. So I think that helped.
Mm-hmm.
I'd really not ever put that together like that before, but yeah, that was a huge confidence builder.
You learned how to present.
Yeah, present, handle things on the fly, handle difficult questions, and how you handle barbs when they're thrown at you and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, really an invaluable skill.
Oh my God.
When you're growing too and your brain's developing.
No kidding. Like you don't need to defend. Just listen, acknowledge. Tim, that's a really interesting question. I'd love to take a moment to think about that. Okay, here's some thoughts. But not meet force with force. To accept the energy and accept the direction of whatever and not get defensive and all of it. Super, super helpful. Yeah.
That's like one of the, I mean, it's probably one of the main reasons me and Kyle started doing this in our 30s, but we're hoping to be able to articulate ourselves better and just communicate as a whole. I think that was probably one of the main reasons.
For sure.
When
it was, and
when you hear yourself,
helpful.
when you listen back to yourself recorded, it's very eye-opening.
Oh boy, no kidding.
I'm sure you've realized
Yeah,
many times.
yeah, once or twice. And you realize how many ums you do and how many pauses you do and all of that stuff. Who was your first ask for this podcast, and why? Why did you choose the person you chose?
I don't even remember who
we got the
first
great question turned on us.
Yeah, come on.
That's a great question.
Was it your mom?
Yeah.
It was your mom.
It was my mother, yeah.
Oh wow. Why?
Probably why, because she'd only slightly, I felt the most comfortable explaining this crazy thing that we were doing to my mother. Because most people's reactions, what are you guys doing? Yeah. What is this? And we honestly didn't completely know.
But let's talk about the real reason why. So
there may be several.
There may be
Tim and I we were out in the town one night.
Okay.
And we had had a few beers.
Okay.
And we said, "Hey, let's go back to the house and do a podcast."
Because we had just been sitting down with each other and recording.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That was how we were just starting to kind of hear how we were essentially working on our ideas out.
We weren't posting anything online. We were just recording it, and then that was it. It wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And for anyone wondering, those will never be posted on.
So this one night we're at my house, and I think we grabbed a 12 or an 18 pack.
Nice.
And we'd already
and so I think this was like 3.5 hours of us drinking beer and talking. And we had this idea, which doesn't happen often when you're drinking. You don't come up with genius ideas, at least normally. And we said, we should start interviewing our family, friends and family,
what a great idea.
and record the conversation.
Yep.
And that will be something that everybody in our family and our friends will get something out of that.
Yeah.
So that's where the idea came from, to do his mom, and then that made it comfortable for us to just start asking friends of, hey, let's just record a conversation.
Yeah.
So it was a way for us to just get started.
I love that. There's so much, and here's how I understand what you guys are doing. This is the art of kind of narrative storytelling. It's getting people to talk about them, their lives, different issues, how they came to be, how they came to believe and there's not enough of this deeper understanding that goes on in the world. Now, I know that there are some kind of nationwide efforts, like I think there's one called the Storytelling Project or something. They put people in a booth and tell me about your childhood, like all that kind of stuff. But I think that this is so important for people to ask and to listen, to see us, that it's sadly missing in so many of our walks of life. So many. Like, you are both very good interviewers, question askers, and there's no preconception with you don't want me to go in a particular way. I've noticed this in your podcast. You're willing to accept whatever comes out, ask the next question, the deeper question, whatever it is, and leaves people feeling really seen. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. It's been
thank you for that too.
Yeah, it's been helpful for me. I would say to feel more a part of the world. Yeah. In that I get to understand somebody where maybe I had a preconceived idea who they were
Yeah.
or what their story was. And then I found out something very different. And then I kind of realized, well, of course, they're the way they are. Like, why would they be any different? And I don't know that there's any other way than to accept somebody after you've kind of walked through their life and why how did that cookie crumble?
Yeah.
Like, well, yeah, that all makes good sense.
Yep.
So it's been helpful.
So I hadn't thought about that too, Kyle. Like, it's your way of connecting to the world. I like the way you said that.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. It's so easy in doom scrolling and paying attention to our devices and all of that stuff to get disconnected so quickly. We are the most connected society on the face of the planet and most in the history of the world, and yet we are the loneliest.
Mm-hmm.
And efforts like you're making to try and understand people is a really great way of reconnecting into a broader world. I love what you're doing. I think it's very cool.
Yeah. It's been interesting.
Yeah, I can just say hands down with everyone we've interviewed, I know and understand them so much better. And I feel a connection that with a lot of them I never felt before.
Yeah.
And just to have that understanding of, oh my, I had no idea you went through that. You just know people with the information you have, and your mind fills in the blanks.
Oh my God, yes.
And there's a lot of blanks when you just casually know somebody.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know them. I met them at the church social, and they live in the so-and-so neighborhood, and therefore I make up a bunch of stuff about it.
Right.
Or I see a political yard sign in their these days in their yard, and I make up a lot of stuff about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's fascinating, really fascinating.
Yeah, and our brains want to like put everything in a box, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But I think the real answer is yes, and.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, that person, they fit in that box, but they also this and this and this that are layered on top of that.
Yeah.
And so, it's not just like a, one size fits all.
I'm going to try another analogy here. See if this one works. Since the bicep thing worked, okay. It's really easy.
We're going to steal that bicep
I hope
thing.
so. Please.
I also, I just want to, because I'm thinking of it now. I listened to you on a podcast, Foster, and I heard the greatest quote from you. You said, "I'm not a psychologist, but I play one on TV."
Oh yeah.
I thought it was very funny.
I stole that from some commercial years ago.
He really just doesn't want to have to deal with the insurance and the errors and emissions insurance.
Exactly right.
I interrupted you though.
No, it's all good. We tend to categorize. We tend to put people in boxes. There's a wonderful book. I'll mention this here. Leadership book called Leadership and Self-Deception. And it's a fable, and it's super easy read, and it's super powerful book. But it talks about how we put people in boxes. It's really, really well done. Anyway, international bestseller. Anyway, so we tend to, in our busyness, our busy minds, crowded, with very little mind share available to really relate to people, we tend to see them in two dimensions or shades of gray, maybe like an old fax machine would, And what this does, when you can slow down and lose judgments, the colors start to come out. Back in the day, God, I'm using all these old stories. Back in the day, the camera company Polaroid, Polaroid?
Mm-hmm.
You'd take a picture and then you'd expose
you gotta
wait, light and air, and sometimes you'd shake it.
Yeah.
And then the colors would start to emerge over time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what you guys are doing. You're getting out of the two dimensions of, white and black, shades of gray maybe, and letting the colors of who that person really is start to emerge.
Yeah, an hour and a half later through the through the podcast, the colors are there.
It's a multicolored kind of thing.
That is a good analogy.
Like
good job.
There, yeah.
Heck yeah, dude.
I'm an analogy man here tonight.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Come on.
So you said back to this dream. You had this dream at 49.
Yeah.
What was your kind of internal dialogue as far as how you were running your business or living your life prior to that? Was that I mean, was there hints of this prior to that, or was that just the kind of light switch moment where things changed?
Yes, and it was a light switch moment, and I had been progressively bored at various parts of my career. So at 49, I'd been doing this business for 20 years. And honestly, wanting to do good work by my clients and also chasing revenues. I mean, I had payroll to make and had to do that for 35 years. And, so I would do things that would get good revenues that just bored me to tears. It's funny, my wife, Cathy, who's in the same business, and I differ in this, because if there's a training, a learning experience, I want to design it. I want to pilot it, and then I want nothing to do with it. And she wants to come in and deliver it 100 times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would put a gun to my mouth if I did that. It would just drive me nuts. So over the course of that 20 years, I'd be really trying to innovate and create new things, which is really important to me. And then you'd get into a period of kind of stability where you'd sell it a lot. And so in those periods of stability, I'd get really bored. And so kind of like this. And so I don't know where I was at that point.
Because you weren't creating
49.
something new.
Right.
Right. So you're just, you created it and it's working and it's repetitive.
Yeah.
And it's consistent and you're making payroll with it.
Well, simplistically, yes. Let me take another layer of that too. That every time we would go into a client setting, we're trying to understand and help solve a complex set of issues. So all our solutions were always, most of our solutions were always kind of bespoke. They're always unique.
Sure.
But some of them I could use the same old technology and the same old thinking, 70% of which I'd done before.
Yeah.
80%.
So a lot of that stuff's repetitive. You just customize it to the situation.
Right. And that stuff didn't fire me up too much.
Right.
I mean, I remember in kind of when we first started out, I had a client. I don't even know how this happened, but they wanted me to do, honest to God, I just remember the symbol, but not the circumstance. It was a data processing company in 1983 or 84. So they were mainframe, big ass computers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing a leadership or management development program for them. And one of the exercises, don't ask me how I did this, was I wanted them to start working to be more creative and to access different parts of their brain. So I would have them go through, I had heard that listening to classical music equalizes both hemispheres of the brain. I don't know if it's true, but that's what I'd heard. So I'd play classical music in the classroom. And then I would give them drawing stuff in the whole painting, whatever, supplies. And they would have to draw with their non-dominant hand. And why I did that, I have no idea. But it was really just trying to open them up to stuff. That's the fun stuff I'd love to do.
Mm-hmm.
I did one thing for a client one time. We were doing this. This client, this is also the one that told me, or the one that became one of our most impactful engagements ever. His marching orders to me were never play small,
Mm-hmm.
never hold back. Wow, clients don't say that to consultants very often. So we were doing this meeting. It was
He wanted to get his money's worth.
Oh, I guess. But he knew there was another level there. If we play safe, you're going to get the same old, same old. If we don't play safe, you can get the peaks really easily, more occasionally. We were doing this thing, and we were trying to get, oddly enough, it was trying to get these hospital administrators to kind of break out of their same old thinking and behave more innovatively. And we had a series of breakout rooms and stuff. And one of them, I bet there were 200 people in each breakout room, the normal hotel seats. And on the big screen in front of them was playing the movie The Wall, Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Mm-hmm.
And huge speakers and cranking, just another brick in the wall. And basically what they're talking about is trying to promote sameness, and you just behave and just come out and you're another cookie cutter kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And under everybody's seats, we had some foam balls. And their only instruction was, when you see something in this room that pisses you off,
throw the ball at it.
Express yourself. There are things under your seat.
Okay.
We have the coolest fight going on with these balls.
That's fun.
Great. I saw somebody 20 years later. I saw her this summer. She remembers that moment.
Yeah. Throwing balls around the
room and why it was important and how that landed that point. I love doing that point because really that's all you're trying to do is get people to pay attention, remember something and act on it.
Yeah.
And so,
well, it also if you think about that, like how many balls flew around the room each time, and I'm inferring here, but each time somebody threw the ball around the room, that was like they got pissed off.
Yeah.
This process sucks. We got to fix it.
Yeah.
And so they'd throw a ball, and then 5 minutes later, somebody else throws a ball, and before you even, get through the process, you're like, we've pissed off the whole room here.
This is great.
Yeah,
we got them going.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fun. Anyway, so that's not everything can be that fun, but people learn in their whole bodies, and they learn best when things are fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm an instructional designer at heart. So I try and put all that stuff into leadership development, into men's work, into small group stuff, all of that. Try and put fun in.
Yeah.
And whole body learning whenever possible. So, yeah.
Cool.
So, Tim, that was a hell of a long way to try and get around your question. But yeah, I think there was some boredom involved, wanting to do something, truer to my highest and best, which I think there's a degree of creativity that I've always treasured in my life. And when I'm doing that, I'm on fire. And I probably wasn't on fire in that moment.
I feel a sense of relief when I hear you say that, because as I've said numerous times, my biggest fear in life is everything becoming mundane.
Mm.
And sometimes I worry, am I just tough to please because I'm getting bored all the time? But it's driving me to keep pushing into new things, and it's refreshing to hear that.
It's that restlessness that makes great shit happen in this world. So I would really hope you don't lose it.
Yeah, I try not. Yeah, that's like my biggest fear is just knowing I played it safe and did the easy, simple things.
I'm just unpacking a lot of that now for me at age 69. Like, where am I still playing it safe? Habits, physical, emotional. Where do I hold back from saying the truthful thing? All of that. That never stops for me. So boy, I wish I'd figured that out when I was in my 30s.
I remember this moment when I don't know, it was a young kid, and I look at my uncle, and I was like, maybe I was like 10 or something. I'm like, man, I can't wait till I'm his age and I have it all figured out. And then the older I get, I'm like, oh yeah, this never ends. And I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah, cool. That's cool. Yeah, and it's terrifying. One of the things I've also learned, and I'm learning every day, is I don't sit with discomfort very well. I work to resolve it or ease it. I'll have a drink. I will watch TV. I will doom scroll. I will, go to bed half an hour earlier. I will, whatever it is, whatever the coping mechanism is, sitting with discomfort, getting some uncomfortable news, getting some feedback from somebody, knowing you've pissed somebody off or broken something that will require some real humble pie to kind of resolve. I don't sit in that stuff well. And kind of one of my goals for this next phase of life is to have a better relationship with discomfort.
Mm.
Do you know who Robert Greene is? He's an author. He's written quite a few books. It's like the 48 Laws of Power. I just heard a soundbite or a short clip of him, and he was saying one of the biggest things that changed for him was how he dealt with his anxiety.
Mm.
Because he realized most of his life it was, how do I just get it to go away? And once he started listening to it and utilizing it as a tool, oh, I feel anxious because I'm not doing something I want to be doing, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And from there on, he's learned how to kind of use it as a tool to write more and to publish these books. It sounds similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, I think so. I've done a bunch of men's work, and one of the early groups that I did work with was a group, the Mankind Project. And in that training, that's based a lot on Jung, Carl Jung's work on the shadow. And if I had to boil it down, for me, it is making friends with that and walking with the shadow and not denying it.
Mm-hmm.
And not trying to shine brighter to make the shadow go away, because it never will. But it's learning to embrace the negative side of our psyches and our behavior, and acknowledging and making that a part of kind of who we are. And very important. Yeah, because I don't want to acknowledge that there's a dark side to me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm well polished, and
yeah.
Look, I even dressed up for you guys today.
We got a vest.
Look at this. Well, I know I had a board meeting and I had to dress up for it too, so it wasn't going to change.
Well, it's interesting that you say that you don't sit well with discomfort, because you're so polished. No.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's truth to that.
Yeah.
For anyone who couldn't see, because Kyle's facing the wrong way,
he
delivered a beautiful wink.
Yes, he did. Part of that is not giving a shit about so many minor things anymore.
Yeah.
That helps the polish, because okay, you suck at this. Okay, probably do.
Yeah.
Or there may be some truth, as opposed to getting wigged out about stuff, learning there's a bunch of different truths. So I think that's, part of it is caring less about the minor things.
Yeah. So. Well, I guess, I would consider you a person who's very self-aware and, mindful, and you're paying attention to these things and how you feel about them. That's really why that you don't sit well with discomfort, because you're paying attention to it. Yeah. So I guess it's interesting that you say that. And that, well, I guess it goes to show that it's never ending.
Never ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get a little flustered even when you say that I'm self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. Really? It doesn't feel that way sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, absolutely.
Sure.
It's funny. This has led to my worldview of leadership. And principle number one is the leader goes first.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't expect anybody to be candid if you're not candid. You can't expect anybody to be present if you're not present. You mm-hmm. can't expect anybody to be courageous if you're not demonstrating that yourself. And what's it take for you to get there? It takes a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
But my daughter, Erin, I interviewed her for the book, and she said, if there's a leader in this time who hasn't already done his or her own work, they're pretty screwed.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't started the journey of your own discovery and your own progress about who you are and what you stand for and what triggers you and what lights you up and all that kind of stuff, boy, it's a hard time to start when you're thrown into the crucible of multi-generations and quiet quitting and social justice and, disruptive economies and all that kind of stuff. Don't start now.
Well, so it's funny because these two things, I wrote them down and I wanted to talk about them. So you just mentioned, some really complicated issues, right? People that you coach and that your company works with are expected to have all that stuff figured out and have an opinion and a stance on all these different topics, whether it's gay rights or abortion or DEI or, what's their ESG, their company ESG policy. And, I guess to my awareness or knowledge, a lot of these things have in the last 10 years become issues at work. Where in the past, I think they were not issues at work. Like the company didn't have a policy on this or a stance on that.
The more enlightened ones did, but most didn't.
Sure. And so how do you coach people through, what you're encouraging them to do, which is be authentic and be genuine? That's I would imagine that they're grappling with all these things in real time. So what advice do you give them of like, hey, be authentic? But they're also expected to have all these answers and be very polished with their answers all at the same time.
Now, this is going to cost you a lot of money to get this because this is the gold right here. We say, figure your shit out.
Mm-hmm.
That's the gold. No, at the end of the day, these businesses are all social organizations. We can fluff them up and pump them up and make them seem more than they are, but they're a collection of people.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very core of social interactions is meaning and purpose and belonging, being seen, being regarded, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if your hospital or your professional services firm or your organization has an ESG thing or a DE&I policy. I don't care. That's up to you.
Sure.
What is the truest expression of what you truly value as an organization? And let's start with that as the true north. And even if you thought you were clear 2 years ago, with all this stuff going on, you may not be clear now. Used to be we could set a mission and a vision and your values in place and have them good for 10, 15 years. Nobody paid attention to them anymore. Almost every one of these leaders that I'm interviewing for this book, and I'm at 45 now, 45 interviews. Almost everyone, and these are all, they're hand chosen, they're really good leaders. Almost everyone talks about the primacy of values.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we? What do we stand for? What are we willing to go to the mat over? What are we willing to defend? Not the bullshit things that are on the wall that says, oh, we value courtesy. And then they act like jerks to each other. Not that. Not that stuff.
So do you encourage them to take that shit off the wall?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because you're like, God, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, get that shit out of here.
God, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Because if it doesn't, I mean, if it's on the wall,
yep,
and people aren't acting in that way, then it's not true.
It's not true.
Right? So get it off the wall and until you figure it out, don't put it back on the wall.
And I tell people this, like, the shoe company Zappos.
Mm-hmm.
Is Zappos still around?
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, they're still
Tony
around.
Hsieh died, but yeah, still around. It took them a year of a ton of work to figure out what they really truly valued.
Mm-hmm.
And they involved almost everybody in the organization to do it. It's one of the most brilliant things. And I saw it go into a client organization and say, it took Zappos a year. And they go, well, we don't have a year. What can we do in the next 2 days? Come on. Time's a wasting here.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't really get it. In fact, most of the time it's moving from, and it's like any personal development work. You can rush through it or you can do it right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not willing to go to the mat over the things that you come up with, they're not true. They're not real.
Yeah.
And everybody in the organization knows it.
Yeah.
I've got a client I'm working with right now. They're a young company, and they, several years ago, created their mission, vision, values, all that kind of stuff. And so I walk in there and I go, show me. And they go, maybe I could find a copy somewhere. I go, you don't remember, even the CEO, you don't remember what was on there? No, we put it, it was really good. It was one of those, like, yeah, it was really good. Like, if you're not reinforcing the right behaviors, if you're not trying to extinguish the wrong behaviors, if your personnel or HR policies aren't indexed to that, if you're hiring the wrong people that are not indexed to that, you don't believe it.
Mm.
And so every 2 years, they're going to be redoing it. Like, it's bullshit. It is total bullshit. And why is your workforce not engaged and confused? Let's start there.
Yeah.
So it's a long-winded way of saying, I'm not an expert in DE&I. I'm not an expert in social justice. I'm not an expert in those kinds of things. My job, there was a commercial years ago about a company. I think it was BASF. Do you know BASF?
Mm-hmm.
It's a commercial materials kind of company. And their ad campaign was, "We don't make the paint. We make the paint better."
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't do their ESG policies, but I make them better because I make them focus on what it is that they really want to do.
Yeah. And I guess as I was thinking this, like, this would be very challenging and probably is really disruptive in that, like, you know, another hot topic comes up this week and the company doesn't have a stance on it, doesn't have a policy on it.
Yep.
Because last year, 5 years ago, it didn't exist. It wasn't in the headlines. People weren't paying attention to it.
Right.
And so today it's hot and it might stay hot for another year. And so they now come up with a policy. And so they have this new policy on October 30th. But that doesn't align with what they set up a year ago, which doesn't align with the other policy that they set up 3 years ago.
Yep.
And so when you kind of cross coordinate these things, they're actually in direct conflict with each other. At least that's kind of like how I'm thinking about this cookie crumbling.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, right? Like, I work for a big company, and I don't see the continuity.
Right. Right.
You know, like, the company, you know, wants to say, "Hey, we're super sustainable." I don't know. I'm not seeing it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not seeing that that's a value. You could go on and on, right? And
for sure.
I imagine it's the people that you're coaching, you're kind of coaching them through being authentic, and they're grappling with these things all at the same time. So I guess the only way is to be authentic and say, "Hey, yeah, we're screwed up. Yeah. And we're going to try to get better, but we're screwed up."
Yeah. So if you're publicly traded, the idea of a CEO coming out and saying we're screwed up could affect their stock price, and their shareholders get pissed off, and their board gets pissed. So there are a lot of boundaries around that. I'll give you an example of one thing that I think is just brilliant. It was from the firm Deloitte. In 2012, 2013, they started, I'm making this name up, it's something like this, like a president's council, something like that. And they started thinking about issues that were around in the ether way before social justice, way before Trump, way before any of that stuff. And it said, you know, we are a partnership of 30,000 partners or some crazy number. And no one person has any more say than anybody else. So let's figure out what are the things that we really will stand for, and what are the ones that we won't. And it was a cross section of a lot of different functions and levels and stuff. They started this thing out. They were in dialogue for like 4 or 5 years. But I will say that once the George Floyd thing happened, once some of the other things in social justice happened, some of the election things happened, they had already been super clear on what was important to them as a firm and what they would speak on, and what was not important to them and what they wouldn't. Yep. Women's reproductive rights. Roe v. Wade gets overturned. As a firm that has 150,000 employees, most of whom are women, do you think they need to make a statement on women's reproductive rights when they're pulled back in the United States? Probably. But it's an individual decision each company needs to come to. But they had been working on that for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And so that for them was supernatural. Working with other CEOs, they would go like, okay, October 7th, this hostage taking and murderers murdering Israelis, and then the Israeli response to that, taken by surprise. What can we say? What if we say we're in support of the Palestinians? What does that mean for our They hadn't thought that stuff through. So doing it in real time is the wrong time.
Yeah, yeah. Because you'll feel pressured to do something, or you're emotional.
You're going to piss somebody off, and it's
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I just saw that McDonald's came out and said, we're not red or blue, we're golden. Right. So they're saying, hey, look, we're not going to endorse anybody.
Yeah.
That's just, they're saying, hey, we're not endorsing people. That's it. Period.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Fine.
Yep.
So that's their stance on that topic.
Now it's interesting too, since it's so timely, Washington Post, LA Times refused to endorse a presidential candidate breaking 40 years of precedent, 40, 50, and they did it the week before the election. And it could be totally legit. I don't know, and I will never know.
Sure.
They could have done it 6 months ago.
Right. And it wouldn't have been a big deal.
Not a blip.
Right.
Yeah. And
and you'd think people who were in the press would have known that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I think. So, part of this is we live in a very complex, connected world now. For a leader to not take all that stuff into account and start thinking it through, we pay leaders to look around corners. We pay leaders to be environmentally scanning and sensitive. So to get surprised by, we're suddenly not going to endorse a presidential candidate now. Look, I get there may have been great motivations and stuff, but this stuff should have been figured out a while ago.
Sure.
And that's an easy one. That doesn't involve the
especially because there's a precedent that says that they would endorse.
Right.
So it's not like they weren't planning on it.
They're paying people to come up with their opinions, to vet their opinions, to endorse.
That's right.
Their whole editorial board looks through lots of stuff, and they, 13 or 15 of them or whatever they do to come up with a very thoughtful opinion. And then suddenly we're not going to do that? Like, okay, could have known that 6 months ago.
Sure.
Whatever. Yeah. But so, Kyle, for me, this notion of pressure on all of us to continue to learn as people, to continue to grow as people, is a mandate. It's not, go back to my biceps, it's not voluntary anymore. You go to the gym. You got to go to the gym. Now, hopefully you're doing it in a balanced way so you don't get the things but you got to go to the gym now. I don't know any other way around it because our society is so connected.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I could put a lot of adjectives with that. But people are now bringing greater senses of their own humanity and needs into workplaces because they don't trust government. They don't trust schools.
They don't trust the companies they work for.
Well, actually, the evidence is they do now. They do.
Okay.
They're dependent on companies like, I don't trust my church anymore, which is probably pretty sound. I don't trust the government, which is probably pretty sound. I don't trust academia, which is probably pretty sound. Where do I get as a member of society, where do I get clues and where do I get support and people of whatever? It's coming more now from the businesses than I would have predicted 20 years ago.
That's really interesting.
Erosion of trust in major institutions in our society has really driven people more to pay attention to what their business leaders are saying. So the Palestinian uprising happens and all that kind of stuff. They are expecting their CEOs to make statements.
Yeah.
Now the CEOs are pretty fucked if they, don't, whatever. And if they're doing it in real time, it's really, really hard. So. I don't know how we got it.
Well, it almost
it's a fascinating. I mean, I could talk about it forever because I think that's a rabbit hole that you could just always go down, right? And so I think that's interesting to me. But I've been grappling with all kinds of these things the last 7 years, right? And a new topic comes up, and I say it's new to me, right?
Yeah.
It's new to my awareness.
Yeah.
And these things, I'm like an infant. I've never thought about these things. I've never considered them. Sometimes I don't even know anybody who's gone through it.
Yeah.
And so this is a default of mine, which I'm trying to fix. My default is like, that's stupid. I don't understand it. And it's because I don't understand it. Right. And so then I'm like, well, that's just dumb.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to fix that reaction to say, well, no, I actually don't understand it.
Yeah.
And so let's find out more, right? But it's kind of that discomfort.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
you're saying sitting with that discomfort of not knowing and not even kind of knowing where to go learn about the topic.
Yeah.
So, you know, I feel like like you said, it's constant. You can't get away from it. It's happening all the time.
Yeah, you could you could bury your head in the sand.
I've tried.
Yeah, you get
it only works for a
sand
little
in your
bit.
ears. I know.
It works for like 60 days.
Yeah. One of the critical capacities of effective, and I'll call it enlightened human beings on this planet, for me going forward, is the notion of negative capacity. You know what negative capacity is?
I don't.
Okay. It's this notion of discomfort. So it is, here is alternative A, here is alternative B. They seem to be polar opposites.
Mm-hmm.
Negative capacity means I can let them be polar opposites, or I can let them be themselves and not work to quickly resolve or quickly decide. Hey, you know what? I'll do a political one. All Democrats are pedophiles. They're baby eaters. They don't care about that, right? All Republicans are like, you know, there has to be some peace in each. That was a terrible example.
But something so extreme
Yeah.
that they both bother you terribly.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah. And you work to say, nope, I'm more comfortable over here. I'm going to resolve it, and I'm going to put this out of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do we? It's the kind of the yes and. I think we're going to have to yes and ourselves to a new level of awareness and consciousness as a society. You know, look, I read in a Substack thing the other day an author that I love. Her name is Catherine May. Wrote a great book called Wintering, which seems to be appropriate for the time right now.
Mm-hmm.
She's an autistic UK woman, brilliant writer. Anyway, let's see, what did Catherine May say? Yeah, I'll come back to it. Can't remember.
Well, it brings up a quote, and I don't know the exact quote, but it's something like what made people successful the last 30 years was to learn as much information as they could. And what will make people successful in their lives the next 30 years is to unlearn what they've learned and relearn something new.
Love it. I love it.
So that resonates with me, of like that topic of like, well, you thought it was this certain way, or you took it for granted as a known, or as the foundation, and it is no longer, or it never was. You just falsely thought that construct existed. Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting.
It's almost like the study of physics, which I didn't study in high school or college, but we're learning stuff about the nature of the physical universe now that wasn't true 30 years ago. We're having to relearn that kind of stuff. Like, no, I'm an expert in physics. No, you're kind of not. If you don't stay up on all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, it gets so perplexing, especially, I mean, you guys have grown up in times of change that I can't even imagine. Like, you think about from 2001 with, 9/11 happening and kind of the world, the geopolitics kind of turning on their ear, and then all of the disruption in U.S. politics, and then 2008 financial crisis, and then, SARS epidemic, and then, total disruption of our political norms and stuff with Donald Trump, and then, pandemic and the crash, the global pandemic, and rebuilding, all of, like, you guys have lived through change like people like me could only imagine. We used to hear our parents talk about the Depression. Guess what? You guys have lived through. Now, what you lived through is not 9 years long or whatever the Depression was, probably 8 years, something like that. But you lived through more tumultuous change than any society, I think, or any society that I can't even imagine. And
I never thought about it like that.
And it's not going to get any less tumultuous, and it's not going to get any more elongated. There's been a global pandemic every 4 or 5 years since 2000.
Foster,
So you-
you lived through it too.
Well, I did, didn't I? Oh shit! God dang it!
He was putting this all on us.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't care much. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's true. It is true. The amount of, like, who would have thought, like, if you go back and do a kind of a post-mortem on the pandemic and all of the changes that we adapted to as people, we're pretty resilient. We got through that thing in an amazing way. And at least the ones that were fortunate enough to survive it, but amazing. And somehow we keep plugging along. It doesn't mean it's not important. It doesn't mean we don't need to take them very seriously. But we have stores of resilience that, sometimes we don't pay a lot of attention to or give ourselves credit for.
When you were just saying, you said the negative space. That's what you were.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I was thinking when you were using politics as your analogies.
Yeah.
I thought and I don't like to even speak on politics that much because I'm just not overly educated in it or interested. But being in the middle of those two and looking at it, there's complete contradictions and conflicts kind of.
Yeah.
And that's where I find myself essentially stuck, is like what this side says contradicts other things they say. And it's the exact same on both sides. And I don't know, I just find myself stuck in that negative space of, well, there's some logic in both of these.
Yeah.
They also completely contradict the other. So
yeah, I'm going to offer you a way out.
Okay.
An unstuckness. The reality is that we are a society based on laws. We are a society based on democracy, which means majority rules. We have built a political system that's gone away from that, gerrymandering and all kinds of different voter suppression laws and all that kind of stuff.
Corporate lobbying.
All of it. Money, dark money, regular money in politics, all of it. We built a system that's gotten us away from a representative democracy. You think in this country with our technology, we couldn't put a chip in everybody's head and say, what do you think about X? And we'd know in a second. We could do that in a heartbeat. It wouldn't have to involve lobbyists and wouldn't have to involve politicians, all that stuff. I make the point in a sarcastic way. But here's my way through this too, Tim. Almost everybody I meet in this country, regardless of what gang outfit they're wearing, whether it's a Reds or the Blues.
Gang outfit.
Like it's a Crips or Bloods, right? That's what it is. They're tribes.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is today. I don't know a single person that doesn't believe in having safety in our society. I don't know a single person that doesn't believe that government has some role, however big or small we can debate, some role in assuring our way of life is maintained. I don't know a single person that doesn't believe that we need some degree of military and investment in that, some degree of investment in infrastructure, some degree of investment in whatever. Because we have this $350 million pool, not $million, 350 million people pool of complex needs and issues and health and mental health and economic well-being, all this stuff. Most people believe in those things. When you hear one or the other side denigrate the other side with some extreme position, I don't trust that. I don't trust any of them. What I do know is it's the how that we ought to be talking about. So, okay, how do we get safety in our society? I'm not worried about, this will betray my politics. I'm not worried about the border. Montana?
Mm-hmm.
Seriously? I am worried about the amount of violence in our cities. I am worried about whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the how that we can disagree on and have some really good conversation. But to do that, we have to affirm what is common. Do you want a safe America? Yeah. Do you want and we need to bring people together with that level of understanding that I think politics does not do. Politics tries to paint the other side. So get super clear on the pieces that are important to you. vote or whatever, but vote accordingly. But not to their slogans and their histrionics and all that kind of stuff. That's why Kyle and I went to this event with Monica Trinnell recently.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that impressed me the most about what Monica said, regardless of what you think about her politics, she said she lost the last election to Ryan Zinke and started the next day. And she traveled to every county in the state of Montana with a bunch of questions. What's important to you? What are the pressures that you're feeling? What pieces do you need to get resolved in order for your people to feel a sense of well-being? All that kind of stuff. And came back and said to us that night, the most important thing on everybody's mind is housing. And that's what I'm going to focus my attention on. See, it's that level of understanding when politics really works.
Mm-hmm.
How we help with housing and all that kind of stuff, I don't know. But if we talk about it, we figure it out, right? We can probably get stuff resolved. So I try not to pay attention to all the histrionics about it. I have a lot of friends who are very, very opposed to certain beliefs that I hold, and yet we can have really civil conversations about them because we agree on what we agree on. And when I know when I'm talking with somebody, I'm always going to deal with them respectfully. But when I'm talking with somebody and they start to spout talking points they've heard on the news, they're not serious about solving the problem.
They're just repeating what they heard.
Yeah. I have a neighbor who I love dearly. He's a wonderful guy. But talking about the threat China is and the border and letting all, you want to talk about this? You want to solve it? What are we doing here? What dance are we playing here? Because I could give you my talking points and you can give me your talking points and we're not going to get anywhere. What do we agree on? Do we both want good borders? Sure. Heck yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I just think there's so much room in the middle if we agree on common principles and not get caught up on the noise.
Yeah.
Which I guess all kind of goes back to what you're saying with these companies with values and what you're doing. And
yeah, there's a true north, and the true north is our values. If we snap to that grid all the time, we're in good shape. Yeah. How do we handle X? What do your values say?
Do you remember when we did that podcast with Bailey? I never forgot. She said she's married now, was engaged, and she was saying about this guy that she's now married to is, as soon as I realized with your partner who you're dating, that the values is the most important thing to align.
Yeah.
And it seems like the most obvious thing, but I've really very since remembered that, and it makes complete sense.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard because everything's out loud these days. Like, so we meet somebody, we're really vibing with them, feeling really good about them, attracted to them. They like to have fun like we do, all that kind of stuff. And then they might drop a value bomb somewhere like, do we not hang out with them anymore? That's really hard. But at the end of the day, some sort of well,
I guess there's a big difference between a topic and a value that you disagree on. Right. So like, hopefully the values are in line.
Right.
You might disagree on that topic. That's fine.
Yeah. Do you know that James Carville, Mary Madeline story?
Why do I know both those names?
Okay. So James Carville was Bill Clinton's guy. Chief of staff, helped get him elected, all that kind of stuff. He's a commentator on whatever network today. He is a Cajun, talks like a goofball, whip smart. So his wife, Mary Madeline.
Nobody can understand him.
No. And he gets funnier looking as he gets older. It's just hilarious. And he wears an LSU baseball cap. And his wife, Mary Madeline, was exactly that for the other side.
Okay.
And they have a wonderful marriage and have been married for a long time. And everybody goes, how could you be dating somebody like that? Because they're really clear on their core principles. They're really clear. How you go about them, to your point, very different. Very, very different. So, yeah. And, I'm hoping Like, so a real basic one. I just thought about this. A real basic one is the person you're dating interested in, I was going to go down the politics thing. It's not where I want to go. Yeah, what's their? Yeah, forget it. It's not worth pursuing.
All the like, you know,
You can
if you were
edit
to,
that part out.
okay, no, we'll leave it in.
Yeah, that's okay too. That's all right.
If you were to kind of, you know, put people in buckets, if you will, of all the people that you coach and what you see across your business, you know, of all the, I guess, corporate leaders or leaders of those businesses that you guys coach, what percentage would you know, say that those people are being authentic to themselves?
Before I work with them or after? I'm just kidding. Kind of kidding, not kidding.
Well, I'm sure that you've made significant progress between when you start with somebody and when you finish with them.
I'd like to think so, but
or whatever that means, finish with them.
This is a really hard question to answer. It's a great question. It's a hard one because we are involved in a lot in the investor-backed healthcare space. So,
got to make that money, man. The investors need it.
Everybody talks about trying to transform this health system that's 1/6 of our total GDP every year, and we get poor health outcomes. Everybody talks about it. At the end of the day, these guys just want to make money.
Yeah, they're public. A lot of them are publicly traded companies, or even
even before that.
Sure, but at the end of the day, they are a business, and they need to make money for their investors. That's why they're investing.
You know, yes, and
well, I guess it's a big part of it, right?
Well, if you're a private equity firm, you get the Montana State Retirement Fund to invest in you. Mm-hmm. You get, Yale University endowment to invest in you, and you get all this money. And then you buy companies that will reflect the kind of businesses you want them to be and all that kind of stuff. And your whole goal in doing that is to flip them, to hopefully help get the kind of leaders in those teams of these portfolio companies to make them more effective, make more money so you can flip them and make your money. It's not necessarily, they're not measured on whether they're improving healthcare.
Right. They're supposed to make 8%.
They want to flip the firms in 3 to 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. After you've done this a few times and you're sitting on your own personal wealth of 100 million or 200 million or 400 million or 500 million, it's going to be hard to argue that says you need to create a more heart-based organization, or you need to have no, we're pretty good, thank you. we're doing just fine, thank you.
Right.
And
don't let Foster in here.
It's interesting too, because I deal with one guy. Oh man, got stories. Holy cow! Got one guy. Helped him take over another company, and coached him up. Then that company went public. No, they had a transaction. So they had another investor come in and buy them.
Mm-hmm.
They made a shit pile of money. He made a shit pile of money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is still true, but my understanding is when a CEO gets hired into a portco that's invested, CEO typically gets about 3% of the stock.
Mm-hmm.
So they sell for $1 billion. That's a big number that CEO has.
Mm-hmm.
That's generational wealth times 3, right? They don't care necessarily about some of these really nice valued things on the wall. They're going to go get their next one. They're going to go find their next company they can turn around and get invested in. So there's a mixed bag. The people that I'm working with a brilliantly insightful, wonderful leader.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because the company might have a bunch of things on the wall or on the website that say, this is what we value.
Yep.
But And those things may contradict the bottom and the top line.
Good.
And so they might not actually care about those things. Those things are they're placating their employees and their customers, right?
Yeah.
Potentially, right?
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is I think, well, maybe I just don't see it enough. I mean, it's not that it's not happening. Maybe it's just not visible to me.
Yeah.
Is that, and I guess public companies have it a little bit hard. Public companies do have it harder.
Yeah.
Is like, say both, right?
Right.
Like we're doing both.
Right.
We're a company that's worrying about the top line and the bottom line, and we're trying to get these values right.
Right.
And it seems interesting
sure.
is I'm not hearing that, right? And that to me is authentic.
Yeah.
We are trying to do all of these things all at the same time.
Have you heard the phrase triple bottom line or quadruple bottom line?
Have not.
Okay. So that is the yes and approach
Okay.
that many enlightened organizations are trying to pursue. Look, we need to grow our top line because we need to be more vibrant and vital as an organization. That's our measure of growth. We need to be effective bottom line, so no margin, no mission, right? We want to do great things in the world, so we need to make some profit out of it.
Yeah.
The third bottom line could be community or societal impact. We want to do it in a sustainable way.
Sure.
Or we want to do it in a way that we are involved in 30 communities and we want some part of our profits to go back into the well-being of those communities, triple bottom line. So organizations really are, many of them are really trying to take the yes and kind of approach. Again, I keep referring to this unnamed company. The company that I probably am proudest of the work that we did is a company called DaVita, kidney dialysis company. They made a pile of money for their investors. Warren Buffett's one of their biggest investors. They're publicly traded. They made the market value that they created was immense. And those people got very wealthy. Now, that said, their focus was on when a person is getting dialysis for kidney failure, what they call end-stage renal failure, they get hooked up to a machine. They sit in a cold-ish room in a Barca-lounger or lazy boy, 3 to 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, 4 days a week sometimes, forever.
Cycling blood.
Forever. Yep. They're getting their blood clean. And, horrible, horrible thing. DaVita, in addition to improving their financial performance, in 3 years became one of the lowest performers in clinical outcomes they achieved the best clinical outcomes in the history of the dialysis industry. So they're keeping people healthier, which means in their world, they're saving lives.
Yep.
They're saving lives, keeping people healthier, making it a better experience. And then they moved from a really dysfunctional culture to one of the most engaged, active cultures for their people I've ever seen.
And
so they did
all those things probably skyrocketed. Their profits, their bottom line.
All of it.
Yeah.
Simple example. When my friend and his team came in, their turnover was at 52% a year. And within 3 years, the turnover was in the mid-teens. Now, you think that saves you a little bit of money?
Oh, yeah.
You think you can apply that to community well-being? Yeah, you can. And you can still make your great returns for your shareholder. What I get cynical is I see smaller firms. They're going to, the top of the house, the investors and the executives are going to make piles of money, whether or not they did that societal improvement.
Right.
Yeah. I guess I'm enough of an idealist to believe that leadership matters to performance, that culture matters to performance, that employee engagement matters to performance. And if you're performing well, you got great leaders and you have a great culture and people are engaged, you're going to make more money. I just happen to believe that. So that's the premise on which I try and do my work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a yes and for sure.
So what percentage of those people are authentic to themselves?
In this day and age, well better than half.
Okay.
Yeah, well better than half. You can't almost escape conversations about deep listening, about self-awareness, about culture in an organization. You can't escape those kind of conversations. You'd have to be a Neanderthal, right? To like, I've never heard of culture in my org. Like,
Yeah.
like it's impossible. So most people, again, well over half that we work with, have taken some steps toward improving their self-knowledge. Look, if they did what I did and it cost them a marriage in the way, like that's a lot of pain to go through when you may not have to go through it. Just do your work. If it's therapy, if it's meditation, if it's physical health, if it's finding some emotional outlet, if it's a men's group or women's group, like find something. There are apps on your phone for relaxation now.
Right.
How can you can't avoid it. So it's a much more, it's a much easier environment for people to kind of take some steps along the way. Makes our work with them a little bit easier.
Sure. I got to pee again, so I'll be back.
Yeah.
All right.
So how long have you had prostate problems? You're way too young to be going through this.
I know I had a few questions written down, but I'm only thinking of one, and I feel
Okay,
like
cool.
you've indirectly answered most of them. But if there was one thing you just listed off, meditation, relaxation app, is there one thing that you could point to that you do regularly or semi-regularly that is your kind of your one thing that keeps you on your North Star as far as keeps you present, keeps you energized, and I know that's kind of a loaded question, but I don't know if there's something you think, that's the one thing that I've
Yeah, it's a great question. Two things: therapy and journaling.
Okay.
I get up every morning and I journal. That was the Catherine May Connect from before.
Are you still doing the longhand every day?
Every day. And what I find is it just helps accelerate processing of different things. Like I talked to a therapist about the stage of life I'm in and what I need to do to find greater meaning. I'm making it up. I don't know. But so we'll have a lively conversation. And then for the next, I don't know, 5 days, I'm journaling on different things as I process them. And that journaling just really, really helps me because I don't emotionally process quickly. It takes me a while to figure stuff out. But those two, it's fabulous. And I've been doing the journaling thing, try to do it daily for about almost 2 years.
Okay.
Super helpful.
It's funny. I know you because you'd said it was specific in that book to the longhand.
Yeah.
I never had the patience for just to write, like just being impatient. And for a long time I was recording. I would just kind of recorded journals for a long time. Now I'll do a lot more typing now, so I do journal a lot more.
So I sense some resistance here to the writing.
Yeah, it's just a patience thing. I'm like just impatient.
So Tim, here's your challenge. And I've just mentioned this because I realize how many things in my life have suffered because I'm impatient.
Oh, that's a great question to ask yourself, huh?
Oh my God. It's like I get frustrated about changing a tire. So I put it down and I come back to like, no, you can freaking change the tire and get it figured out and just calm yourself down. And relationships with Cathy, I get impatient if something doesn't happen at a certain time, if I have an expectation, or impatient about my own growth, impatient about, I want to lose 20 pounds. I get impatient, so I stop. And impatience costs me a lot of that sense of well-being. It creates a gap from the Foster that I think I want to be or that I think I am versus the one that keeps showing up. Yeah, that's a big one for me.
So you mentioned in your book, leadership, action versus inaction, and thought, time to think versus taking action and motion. Yeah, it's kind of similar, right? Of like, hey, just slow down.
Yep.
And relax. It might take you 3 times as long, but that's the outcome you want.
Yep. I had this conversation today with a woman that helps me stay organized and all the book stuff. She wrote a blog I thought was brilliant this week. She and her husband were in Paris and they went to the Louvre and they had a bucket list item was going to see the Mona Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
They're walking, not seeing a ton of people. And then they turn the corner and it is this mass of people. And she said,
Can't even see the painting.
you can't see the painting. And so that shocked her for a minute. They stepped out of that hall, went around the corner, and there were all these other brilliant Da Vinci paintings.
Nobody was looking at them.
Not a single person was looking at them. And so we started talking about this notion of, in the book, the fable is the tale of the skipping stones. And the metaphor of we run at fast speed on the top of life, just like you're standing on the edge of a lake skipping stones. And it's only when the forward momentum, the energy going forward, starts to dissipate and the gravity starts to take off, that stone can start to slip and slide deeply into the water. And they go like this. Most of them do if they're flat enough to skip, right? And so we run life here, but life is here. Life is here. Da Vinci painted some brilliant things. Like, are you bucket list checking? Well, that's cool. And they went back in the hall and they stood their time and they got up to the front so they could take their selfie and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And she said it was a total bucket list thing. But when her great insight was walking around, taking time, seeing the Da Vinci photos or the Da Vinci paintings around the Louvre that nobody else was paying attention to. That's when she felt like, okay, now I'm getting this experience. I'm here in this incredible art museum and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We just we don't settle in very well. We're running hard.
Yeah, it's like life is passing you by. You're not even paying attention to it, and it's all day, every day. You're like somewhere else. You know, I just finished the book called The Power of Now.
Oh, you did.
Yeah, have you read that one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's an effort to get through.
That book gets me mad.
Oh,
That Discomfort.
I've read it a couple times.
oh my God. Oh boy. Yeah.
Can you say that what you just said about patience again? Your quote, how much is your patience?
Oh, how much my patience has cost my impatience has cost me?
Yeah.
It tremendous. It continues to cost
Or
me.
question, I guess it was.
Yeah. Like, I know what I need to do and I know how I need to show up. And yet I get impatient and it costs me because I stop a task or I interrupt it or I don't do it because I don't know. I just see that a lot. That's another area that I'm trying to journal on, learn about. But it's one I hadn't thought about until about a month ago. And when I get testy, I get tired. The impatience just cranks up. And
I can relate to that.
oh man. Yeah, so I'm going to continue to work on that one.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is like, what does a healthy ego look like? And the reason I'm asking is,
Hey, he only plays a psychologist on TV.
I know. I just
I won't call your insurance company.
Yeah, good.
But the reason I ask is, I would say the last couple of years I've grappled with my ego. I think my ego has driven me to do things in my life that I'm very, very proud of. But my ego has also driven me to do things or not to do things or ignore things that I am not proud of. And so let's call those a wash between the things I'm proud of and not proud of. And so I'm now trying to figure out, like, what does a healthy ego look like? How should I think about the positive things about it? And also be aware of, I guess, the shadow.
Yeah. God, that's such a great question. And I'm so ill prepared to answer it. I'll give you a couple of images that come to mind when you ask that. For me, a healthy ego is, kind of being willing to stand out in the rain and let the rain wash over you without you having to fix it or change it or whatever. What that means to me is the ego itself, to me, is really good organizing energy. It motivates a lot of action. But the stand out in the rain piece means, and so you get feedback, or time passes, and are you okay with that? Do you need to fix it? Do you need to respond? Do you need to defend? Do you need to whatever? I just think there's a healthy ego to me is, look, you are clear, I think, in my knowledge of you about what you're good at doing.
Mm-hmm.
And a healthy ego acknowledges that, look, I'm really good at this. In fact, I may be kind of world-class at this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't try and assume that because you're really good at one thing, this glow happens and you're really good at everything. If you're going to be good at things, you're going to suck at things. And so a healthy ego to me is acknowledging kind of both. Like, look, I'm not the listener that I would like to be. And it causes me some pain and distress, and I'm going to work on that kind of piece. It doesn't mean that I'm a lesser human being, that I'm, all that kind of stuff. It means I've got this skill that I want to develop. And on the other hand, I think I'm really, really good at this. Healthy ego keeps both of them in clear sight.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing, stand out in the rain is kind of much. But it means when you get feedback, you're willing to sit and accept it. So, you know what? You didn't listen. And okay, God, wow. That's not where I want to be in my self-image. And I need to learn from this. What'd you notice?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just being open to the feedback.
Yeah.
It's like the martial art Aikido. From what I know about it, the concept is that you don't meet force with force, but you meet it by joining with its energy and then letting that energy naturally dissipate.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody throwing all kinds of stuff at you and you go, oh, wow, I didn't realize. First of all, you're pretty energized about this. I'm glad you're sharing it. I'm the worst listener ever. I'm willing to take a look at that. I don't think that's entirely true. I don't think I'm the worst listener ever, but I could get better. And so I'd love to get some ideas here. And you like that, like it's being willing to just be in the mix of all that mud, blood, and a beer, like all of that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. It's helpful to kind of frame that. Yeah.
Ego is not a bad word. I think ego is a really good word. Again, it's an energizing force to me. As long as you really clearly, and you're unashamed about your strengths. So many times in my experience the last 25 years is, if we talk about what we're really good at and what we know we're good at, we're boastful and we're trying to stand out, or we're trying to preen up too much, or no, I think it can be a really clear indication of who you are.
Yeah. I guess my understanding of what the ego is, and what it means, and kind of, I would say what the ego is has evolved over the years. I always associated ego with arrogance.
Right.
And,
right.
And so I thought it was like a bad thing.
Right.
If you're being driven by your ego, you're probably too arrogant.
Right.
And then that was confusing to me, because I would say, no, I'm not arrogant about this. I'm just super confident about this particular topic.
Yeah.
And so I think, ego and arrogance, I think I'm disassociating those two things.
Yeah. And
that, you could be driven by your ego and also be very well balanced.
For sure.
And so that's a new concept to me, that you can have both. Right?
Yeah.
Yes and.
Yeah. That's a yes and.
Yeah.
I don't put the two together anymore. I do think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's evolved over time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, look, we have to have a strong, hopefully accurate sense of ourselves. I think that's part of your ego.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really darn good at these things. And yeah, I've got some work to do on some others, but yeah.
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 Well, we've been going for like 2 hours and 15 minutes.
No, we have not.
Yeah.
We have.
Oh
yeah,
my
man.
God. This is like a time warp machine. You come in here and you forget all sense of time. Looks like it just passes.
Yeah.
This is like Vegas. There's no clocks on the wall anymore.
No windows.
No window. Oh man.
We're gonna put a slot machine. In the corner.
Where's the payoff?
Right.
I got these big biceps. I got to use them.
That's it. You want to wrap it up? Or you got anything?
Yeah, that's you. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
My great pleasure. This is so
participating
fun.
and being such a good friend. And yeah, man.
Well, you know this about me. And yes, thank you. And you too. And I'm up for a juicy conversation anytime.
Yeah.
So next time with the 18 pack, I'm good to go.
Foster, if anyone wants to find you or find your book, where can they do that?
Yeah. So all my socials are Foster Mobley. And let's see, books on Amazon. The book is called Leadership, Rethinking the True Path to Great Leading.
And talk about the new book. It's in the works.
Yeah, the new book is called Honoring, which is...
you got a name for it already.
I do.
Heck yeah.
An editor's going to throw that out. But it's addressing the collision that leaders have to face with all of these new humanity needs and all of the business needs, like disruption and AI and all that kind of stuff. How does a leader manage that collision stuff? So yeah, called that. And then the podcast is called Stepwise, and they're conversations with great leaders. Not unlike this one. It's a short form though, so it's a 25-minute commitment for listeners, and that's available on any of the podcast platforms, Spotify and Apple and all that stuff.
Do you have a set release date for that new book?
No, we're in process right now, and hopefully by the end of November, the book proposal will be completed. I've been working on the research and the stuff for about a year, and so hopefully that'll be done, and then we'll shop it to agents and publishers and see what happens. Or I'll self-publish like I did last time.
Okay.
That's a lot of work. I'd rather not.
Yeah.
But I do. It's really the talk about ego. I feel like I've got something to say. I feel like this is something that would be helpful to ease suffering of leaders out there in this time. So I'm pretty motivated that way, and I feel confident it's a unique voice. So that's what my driving force is right now.
Cool.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. We'll put links to all this stuff in our description.
Cool. Yeah, when you publish, I'd love to promote you guys too. So
cool.
Tag me and we'll cross promote.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Foster.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
What a treat.
Yeah.
Thanks.